Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Talking City podcast with your multimedia host, Conor McGilligan. And as always, I am joined by the chief Manchester City writer for the Manchester Evening News, Simon Bajkowski. We're back here with another episode to discuss Manchester City in a buoyant week, which has seen Manchester City drum their City rivals. And it's also seen their City rivals get drummed again midweek against Newcastle, which has been fantastic to see. Si, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. It really has been a buoyant week for City, hasn't it? Like, they've not even played, and it felt like they'd played because, like you say, United got knocked out of the cup at home with another 3-0 defeat. But not only that, but the Newcastle fans picked up Old Trafford is falling down, and it feels like a lot of fans will be singing that at the weekend, and it feels like a lot of them will be singing it, kind of just like picking it up whenever they go to Old Trafford. So... yeah, the more misery for United, the more it is very, very funny for City fans.
It does feel like that. I mean, we came in here on Monday, and I was just do, and it's definitely going to stick now, isn't it? I saw, I think it was just a Man United commentator. I forget, it might have been on YouTube or whatever, and they were saying it is now going to be a thing every single week. Even when they draw games, if they don't win, that song is going to just go around Old Trafford or go around even away grounds, which is going to be even better. So.
And it properly rankles because, like, it's not like United fans can disagree with the first line, and the longer they play, despite the language, it's the manager's not really doing much to disavow that. So it's kind of like, yeah, basically teams are going to go to Old Trafford and say your stadium is falling down and sing that at you for 90 minutes or until like United score against them, which they're not doing much of at the minute. So it's been a very good week for City. I mean, good week for the players in the sense that they've had plenty of rest, but also for the fan base, they basically just had a week to sort of coast off that derby, but then also see kind of United self-destruct a bit further.
Yeah, because I think if they had a midweek game, I think if they'd had, like, you're almost preparing for that midweek game, aren't you? Whereas a week of just, and seeing more meltdown on the other night.
Yeah, if they'd had like a press conference against, so like who are they playing next Tuesday? It's Young Boys at home. So say they'd had a press conference on Monday or Tuesday, which was all Young Boys, it kind of would have shifted it away, whereas they've just had a week to sort of sit back and chuckle.
And they were so cocky, the Man United fans, Si.
Yeah, and they thought they were going to do it. And also as kind of like a minor thing, I think if you get knocked out of a cup, you kind of always want to get knocked out by the winners, just as like the winners beat us. So having been knocked out by Newcastle, it was probably...
Newcastle C team, don't forget.
Yeah. It was probably nice to get Newcastle beating United for many reasons, but one of them also being, that Newcastle knocked City out, so it's kind of nice to see them doing well, although they've got Chelsea away in the quarters, so like if they beat them, maybe get Liverpool in the semis, what a run they'll have to try and win their first trophy for a while.
Yeah, it'd be interesting just because obviously they're a competitor with Man City if they're going to keep with that same team, isn't it? Obviously they played a very Emil Kraft, I think he'd come back from about 8 years out, played the other night centre back, and then Paul Dummett. Oh, it's just great to see, just fantastic. But anyway, let's get on to Manchester City. You've done an article, a really good article this week, Si, about Julian Alvarez's development at Manchester City. Tactically, I think it focuses on obviously other teams overthinking his position at this moment in time. He's been just in that Man United game as well, it just almost was symptomatic of Julian Alvarez this season, just sort of going under the radar, but putting in, once again, a solid, consistent performance. And he's just, he seems to be really taking on the mantle since Kev's been out.
Yeah, I think there is sort of, I've talked about it before, but Alvarez is kind of like over and underappreciated, and kind of you don't notice kind of the pressing that he does, but sometimes he doesn't seem to do very much, but then just pops up with a goal. Yeah, again, to take it back to Ten Hag, like when the United team came out or was leaked before the derby, the big thing was like, why on earth is Raphael Varane not playing? Why have you got Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire starting ahead of him? And Ten Hag said it was tactics, and nobody could quite believe it. And yeah, Alvarez seemed to have quite a quiet game against United. But afterwards in the press conference, Ten Hag was kind of pressed on why he picked Evans ahead of Varane and Maguire. And he really didn't like being pressed on it. But he sort of said, well, when you play City and they build up, we need like a strong player on Harry Maguire's better on the right side of defence rather than the left. And Johnny Evans is better to be on the left than Rafa Varane is when you've got Alvarez coming in, pressing you. And he was kind of like, right, so even though Alvarez hasn't appeared to do very much, he's dictated your team selection basically into like a really hugely controversial pick among United fans. And it was just kind of a sort of behind the scenes look at the kind of problems Alvarez is causing for opposition managers. You know, when Ederson came into the league a few years ago, I remember speaking to coaches who were at other clubs who just said, this guy has changed the game. Like, he can play midfield for City, he's that good. We've never seen anything like him in the Premier League, and we now have to change our entire game plan, and we spend days thinking about like, how do we stop Ederson? And when we speak to other managers and other coaching staffs before they play City or after we've played City, we say like, what is this guy about? And that was really like, you know, instructive for how significant Ederson had been. And then you get obviously like everyone trying to double mark Haaland and trying to take him out of the game. And now we've got Alvarez, who is causing managers to try and come up with out of the box solutions to try and limit his influence in the game. And you know, as we saw on Sunday, it leads to mistakes.
Where do you see his best position? Do you still see him as, obviously Haaland dictates everything right now, but obviously he was brought in at City, to City I should say, as almost a centre forward, wasn't he, or maybe a shadow striker. But at this moment in time, in that midfield, he just seems so. I mean, even sort of the right side of that midfield, like you say, when he was pressing on their left hand side, they just couldn't cope with it. They can't pass through City. And then their only option is to go long, really, to Haaland, which City's physicality and athleticism at the minute is able to cope with that. So it's like, is Alvarez, as you just said, when opposition teams are overthinking it, is it best in being in midfield for that reason only?
Yeah, I think I think he would still see himself as a striker and leading the line. And you think back to last season when Haaland was out and he started against Liverpool in April and he did really well and scored, and that is where he ultimately sees himself. But he has sort of carved this niche into the team while De Bruyne has been injured that does really work, like you say, because he's a bit further back in the pitch. His press is almost kind of more aggressive, and we've seen him kind of do that a bit for Argentina when he's done kind of a lot of Messi's running as kind of a support striker, and he is that really. He's more a 10 for City than an 8, but he just seems to have. I think the key is he needs to be kind of close to the box, and he probably needs to be in the middle to be able to press really well. I think when nobody knew very much about him, it was maybe kind of, you thought, well, when he doesn't play centre forward, he might play out wide, and we've just not seen him wide at all, really. Pep has preferred to use him in that middle, as the team has kind of gone more sort of constricted into the middle spaces. So that is, he's kind of been behind that drive to get into the middle. So keep him between the posts probably.
I wanted to. You mentioned Ederson there, and I am fascinated by what you just said, really, in terms of like coaches trying to figure that out. I mean, obviously, you know, we're not elite coaches, but how do you figure that out? How the conundrum that is Ederson, you know, if they are trying to overthink how to stop him playing out from the back and to stop him just conducting play.
Yeah, it's really hard, and it goes to explain or help explain why City ran away with the league in 17-18 and why he is still so successful, because I still don't think anyone can do what he does in the game. You know, like Brazil are very fortunate to have both him and And Alisson, I spoke to Franz Hoek for an article about it years ago. He was kind of like the godfather of modern goalkeeping. He worked at Barcelona with when Pep was there, but also Van Gaal. He was kind of Van Gaal's goalkeeping coach with the likes of kind of like Victor Valdez and players like that. And he said like Alisson is kind of like the perfect goalkeeper for the defensive side of the game, and Ederson is the perfect for the attacking. So if you could combine both, it would be a dream for anyone. And Ederson's defensive players got a lot better. But yeah, it is really tough. And you saw it a bit with City in the derby. Like for years they've pressed David De Gea up high because he's not very good with his feet. And with Onana, after the Champions League final, where he sort of was one of Inter's better players, they didn't really press him as much. And that is how a team can how one player can change the way a team sets up, because City weren't able to be as aggressive or as high because of Onana. Now, teams went at City in 2017 after having Claudio Bravo, who just like went to pieces at City. And they kind of went at City hard, and then they went at them hard and, found a goalkeeper who just smacked the ball over the top.
I think as well, Si, Bravo, it's a blast from the past, but Bravo, when he was pressed, it was almost he'd panic. I think the big thing with Ederson is in any situation. There was even they got a bit excited at the weekend when City were playing out the back, and I think Foden nearly played Haaland through, didn't he, at one stage, and they were getting a bit excited, galvanising the Man United side to press a little bit higher. And he gets to Ederson and they're roaring them on to press. He gets to Ederson and there's just a lovely curved ball out wide to walk, and there's just no panic whatsoever.
No, but it is really hard, because what do you do when he's got the ball? Because if you press, then he'll knock it over the top, and if you if you don't press, then it allows City to get more forward, or he'll just knock it short and they'll build from there. And even, there's some analysis of him after the game that showed him like taking out 6 players in one kind of straight low pass, which again, is kind of becoming a hallmark of his game. He sort of finds someone on the halfway line, sort of drilled straight along the floor. And he just like makes it look so simple, but still 6+ years after coming to the league, there's no way of stopping it. It really is like a hugely important part of Pep's football, and sort of, there are more teams playing the Guardiola way. There are more teams playing that possession-based football, which there certainly weren't in 2016 in England when he came over. But still, no one's really got their Ederson, and and this isn't. I think it was close to a world record fee for a goalkeeper at the time, but it was quickly like, Liverpool paid more than double for Alisson. I think Chelsea paid more than double for Kepa. So his fee is like doesn't look really expensive at the minute, but he'll go down as like somebody who changed the Premier League and changed the game.
There's always the comparisons as well between Ederson and Alisson, but it's getting to that point this season as well. We were speaking about on Monday's pod where Ederson has now, the focus has increased so much, because obviously we were saying he just never has the ball. He never has the ball, really, when you're looking at a 90-minute spell. So when let's say a team hypothetically counter-attacks and he has to be called into action, sometimes there's been criticisms that maybe he hasn't been on his A game. But this season, what we're seeing now is the shot stopping and the focus being exponentially better, and his trajectory is just going up, isn't it? So it's going to be interesting, even Brazil's selection going forward, because he's got better, Ederson.
Yeah, and the Brazil coach since the summer is someone who is more kind of values Ederson's skills than Alisson. So Ederson's kind of got back in there. But I think if you said to any Premier League team you can have Ederson or Alisson, most of them would still take Alisson, because he's a fantastic keeper and he's more kind of traditional and he's an easier fit for the way most teams.
Best in the world, aren't they, both of them?
Yeah. But Guardiola would always have Ederson, and like even more so now that Ederson's kind of improved his defensive side of the game. And there was some quotes from Ortega this week talking about wanting to be number one, and he kind of isn't as good with Ederson. He's more Alisson than Ederson probably, but he certainly feels, and City certainly feel like that competition has helped Ederson to improve.
Can a number 2 goalkeeper who is the standard of Stefan Ortega be happy though with, I don't know, potentially years on the bench, when he could be playing first team football at very elite teams?
Yeah, I don't know. I spoke to Shay Given about this recently, who obviously had it with Joe Hart at City, and his answer was kind of no, it's not sustainable when you have someone that good. And Bayern were obviously interested in Ortega, making him number 1 this summer. So there is plenty, but I don't know. I saw kind of a lot made of Ortega's comments, like not happy that he said he wants to be number 1, and not happy that he said that Haaland wasn't the best technically. And it's like, well, Haaland's not the best technically at City. You only have to watch like one Rondo and see him get monstered in it to know that he's not. But, he is the best in the world at being a striker, which is what Ortega said.
He's not the best technically, come on.
No, he's not. Like, he's just daft.
There's better technical players in the City side than Haaland.
Yeah. But, Ortega can't be happy sitting on the bench every week. And when he spoke to us the other week after he started at Brighton, he sort of said, yeah, I want to start more games, and I feel like I deserve to start against Brighton. So that is a situation that will be bubbling away. And also City have had it before where, like, they have had some number 2s that have looked decent, and then they've kind of fizzled away by not playing. I mean, even arguably, like, not just goalkeeping, like Gabriel Jesus when he first came was out of this world, and then declined because he kind of lost his confidence and something in his game when he wasn't playing regularly. So, I don't know how sustainable it is, and Ortega, and it's ultimately up to Ortega and the goalkeeping staff to work on that, and for the manager to sort of keep his players happy. But over the last year, 18 months, it's had a positive effect on the number 1 goalkeeper.
100%, yeah, and that might be even more beneficial for City, really. Let's talk Ballon d'Or, because we didn't in the last pod. Haaland not winning it. Was he robbed over nostalgia? Sorry.
I mean, yes, but it is Messi. It is. I would kind of expect that Erling Haaland will win multiple Ballon d'Ors in his career, and I would expect that at least one of them will be when he's towards the end of his career. And maybe he doesn't deserve to win it, but he's done enough, like Messi has done enough to earn it over, someone else. I think Haaland will probably go down as not quite Messi, but like certainly in that category of the best players we've seen ever in the game. So he's going to win plenty of individual awards. Already has, but also he'll win Ballon d'Ors. I'm fairly confident, and quite possibly win Ballon d'Ors at Manchester City.
It's so difficult with the Ballon d'Or because I don't really know how they judge it, but the World Cup and these sort of international competitions seems absolutely paramount, doesn't it? Obviously, Messi winning the World Cup and it being such a brilliant story. He's nearly got there, but he's just fallen at the last hurdle. And let's be honest, in my opinion anyway, he's the best player of all time. But it's very difficult seeing almost someone get ahead of him. But the feat that Haaland...
Yeah, well, it's hard as well because it's a bit like the Oscars when, Summit wins and you're like, that was 10 years ago. How did that win? It was just probably 10 months ago, but so much has happened since then. The World Cup was big at Christmas, but we're nearly at Christmas again.
Don't tell me that.
It's, Emi Martinez won the goalkeeping prize, and I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but he was outstanding for Argentina in that tournament 10 months ago. He's been good for Villa, but
that's surely what it's based on, then, isn't it? It's all based on that
but he's not won the Champions League final with a great goalkeeping display, and I'm not saying Ederson should have won it, but I'm just saying it. Yeah, you're kind of hanging off these big achievements. A lot of Liverpool fans fuming that Alisson wasn't even in the top 10 because if you're talking about consistency over 12 months, but then you you know, you sort of look at what have Liverpool won or what has Alisson helped Liverpool win? Nothing, right? Well, it's almost a bit like player ratings. Like it kind of gets, everything comes back to player ratings, but it hangs off like these prizes that you do or do not help your team win. And, you know, the biggest prize is the World Cup. And that's why, you know, I think Haaland deserved the Ballon d'Or, but it's even without the narrative, like Messi was the reason that Argentina won the World Cup, or the biggest reason. So it's very hard to sort of say he doesn't deserve to win the individual prize, because that is so big. You know, it only comes around once every 4 years as well. So you really have to be on your A game to get it. It's not like, it's a lot of skill and luck and preparation and things like that.
Yeah, I think as soon as Messi's out the way, which will be very, very soon,
yeah.
I think it opens so many doors, because Ronaldo's been out the door now, hasn't he, for 3-ish years. As soon as Messi's out the door, it's just been dominated by them over the last 20 years, hasn't it?
But also as well, you know, you look at the City representation, 5 City players in the top 10. 5 City players. And, you know, City have been the best team in Europe for like 5-6 years. They haven't had 5 City players in the top 10, ever. But they win the Champions League and suddenly they get all this recognition. And, you know, that is, because I remember Pep came in for his press conference in Istanbul after they'd won. And, you know, say, oh, this is, you know, fantastic. And he's like, remember the Carabao Cups we won. I want people to remember the Carabao Cups we won. And it was such a Guardiola answer. He was like, we should build a museum to remember the Carabao Cups that we've won. Like, I want recognition for everything we've done domestically now. But it's true. Like, they've got that now because they've won the Champions League and they've won the treble. So the biggest tournaments do kind of validate and legitimise all the other successes.
It's true. You bang on. Well, I hope we've given a thorough description there, but we're going to be back with Act 2 discussing academy exits and Kevin De Bruyne.
Whether it's the legendary Lionesses, grassroots, or expert analysis of the women's leagues, Women's Football News has it all covered. A brand new monthly magazine packed with news, interviews, and expert opinion. Don't miss Women's Football News. Pick up a copy today from participating retailers. Women's football is here to stay, and so are we.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Si, let's get straight into it. Straight to the point. 4 key academy exits at the club.
Yeah. It's quite an interesting one, really. I mean, the news this week is that Charlotte O'Neill, who was head of operations for the academy and has been interim head of the academy for the last 5 months, is becoming the new managing director of the women's team. So that is very exciting for the women's team. You know, a very good appointment for them, but does leave a hole in the academy. And sort of the way the academy is run, you would have the head of the academy, which was Jason Wilcox, but he left in the summer. And then kind of below him, you would have head of operations, which was Charlotte O'Neill, who'll have to be replaced. Head of recruitment, now Joe Shields left last year, so Sam Fagbemi's been in position for a year. But they have lost the head of UK recruitment, which is quite an important position this summer because Stuart Thompson's gone to Chelsea. And then head of coaching, and Stephen Torpey, kind of one of the, well, there's 2 really, but he's one of the big 2. He is going to Brentford. So sort of your 3 sort of branches below the head of the academy, you've lost a key person from, as well as losing the head of the academy since summer, basically, which is a lot. And City will see it as a success because, you know, in the same way that they see selling James Trafford to Burnley and selling Shea Charles to Southampton, and, you know, they want their staff to be coveted for bigger and better things. And these people are going on to bigger and better things. You know, Wilcox is director of football at Southampton, and everyone's gone on to a better job. But it does make it hard for the people who replace them to come through. Now, City have done amazingly well as a club in replacing, your companies and Agueros and everyone. And also, like, it's hard to believe, like, Guardiola lost 2 assistants this summer, and they've just kind of ploughed on through that. Lilo's come back and brought his assistant, and they do that. But that isn't to say that it works every time just because it's worked in the past. So it's a really interesting time for the academy. We're not saying that they're going to torpedo and crash and burn, but we're saying that it's going to be very hard for them to. It was going to be hard for them to stay at the top anyway, but it's certainly going to be harder for kind of new people having to come in and bring their own ideas.
Yeah, and a lot of people think about the players, don't they, and recruit. Like, if you lost when you lose Gabriel Jesus, how do you replace him? When you lose Zinchenko, how do you replace him? But the inner workings of Manchester City are these, the recruitment, males and females, and the academy people as well. They're so important, as important, if maybe not more important than the players, and the inner workings of Manchester City are all, as we've said before, conducted by these people. So it's huge that they get these appointments right, really.
Yeah. I mean, Guardiola once said kind of Bajkowski was responsible for like 70% of City's success, or 80%. It was like the recruitment team does it and then we do the rest. And, he's probably underplaying it as he does, overplaying it, underplaying his own hand. But it is the reason the academy is able to function so well is because you get the right people in place at the top, or any business, any football club, get the right people in at the top. And City have had a lot of change at the top of their academy, so it's going to be a real test of the people kind of in the club who've appointed the people at the top of the club who've appointed these people to be at the top of the academy, to see how well those appointments go. And again, City would say, well, if we were that worried, we wouldn't have moved Charlotte to the women's team. We would have kept her in the academy to kind of keep this senior figure in place. But the fact remains that she's gone from the academy, and she needs her role will need taking over.
That's very interesting. Let's move on to Kevin De Bruyne. So I just wanted to get a bit of a thought process of you, of yourself at the minute, side, with regards to him and his position. Obviously, injured now, has been injured for a while. Long term this season, do you think City, with what you've seen, especially when they've sort of revitalised with these last 3 wins and they've sort of moved the pieces around a little bit, we're seeing Rodri get forward a little bit more, we're seeing Alvarez really comfortable in that midfield role, we're seeing Jack and Bernardo have a little bit of synergy and cohesiveness there, and we're seeing a real sort of, this is the City side we feel is going to go forward and do well, and Pep's got it right at this moment in time. Do you think the City side right now can cope without Kevin De Bruyne and still compete at the top and win trophies ultimately?
Yeah, I think they can. I think they've certainly shown in the last few weeks it's kind of been an upturn, that they're able to do things without De Bruyne. I mean, they were able to win the league without him a few years ago when he was out for most of the year. So the great thing about this City side is that they're not really reliant on any one player, although Rodri might test that. But they have been able to have success without players. But at the same time, I still think we're at that point where De Bruyne makes them a better team. And then once De Bruyne is back, and you sort of forget the season is very long. Like, we're into November now. City didn't really start playing well last season until May. Not May.
The season was done.
March, like middle of February maybe. They lost to Spurs at the start of February and the season looked done. And then it took them a few weeks to kind of get going. It was, and even, De Bruyne, February, start of March, was kind of out of the team. He wasn't really on it very much. And then he came back in and City picked up the form. And so, I still envisage a point this season where De Bruyne will come in for the business end of the season and City will be better for having him in the team.
But it's going to be like a new signing, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. because he can, a bit like, Ederson in goal, but De Bruyne can still do things on a pitch that no one else can do. And it might be that they find a way of playing without him that is very, very effective and great to watch and fantastic. But I'm not yet at that point where I'm thinking they're a better team without him.
No, I think it was just so interesting how we were speaking about how efficient Haaland has been. He's still getting so many chances even without Kevin De Bruyne, which maybe shows an even greater efficiency with Manchester City's midfield. And
Yeah. Although, again, you would still sort of say, if you could pick one player to provide a chance for Erling Haaland, it would always be Kevin De Bruyne. So while that is the case, he's still going to be pretty essential when he comes back.
yeah, it's the big difference, isn't it? On that, and this is once again far away, but obviously we don't know when his return is, but I think we've discussed this a little bit. I've discussed this with Joe and a couple of other of our writers, but do you think City should utilise the January market, or would you almost just, do you think City have almost done the business in it in the summer months and it'll just work in the long term? Obviously pending no injuries going forward.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because when Rodri was suspended and they had a few injuries, it was sort of like the squad looks really thin. Right now, the squad doesn't, and there are sort of first-team players who aren't making match-day squads, only like, Oscar Bobsay or people like that, but still play, and Guardiola doesn't like that. So I would expect Phillips to leave in January. If he wants to play at the Euros, he's not going to get it by.
Do you see that as almost a thing that's going to happen?
I think, well, like I've said before, he should be lining that up already, because I think since he said that, he's not started a game. Since we've had Brighton, Young Boys and United, since we've had 3 games since he made those comments and he's not started. So,
and even when Rodri was absent, it was fleeting.
Yeah,
basis, wasn't it?
Yeah. You're sort of looking at Saturday, like Bournemouth at home is the sort of game where if you're not starting Calvin Phillips against Bournemouth at home, when is he going to... Probably Young Boys at home, maybe. But again, these 2 games coming up, if he doesn't start either of them, then he has to have sorted out a loan move. And you might think that... I'm undecided on whether they would need to replace him, because we might be at a point where Kovacic and Nunes are sort of enough.
I feel
Nunes especially.
I feel at this moment like he's an awkward part, which Pep's... This sounds awful and it's not disrespectful, but it's almost an awkward part that Pep needs to almost think about every week, almost keeping him happy. But he's got better players in that position who ultimately Pep trusts.
Well, that's it. And Phillips is still like a great part of the squad, and he was in the celebrations at Old Trafford on the pitch, and like he's loved within the squad, and he is, everyone wants him to succeed, but at the same time, as you say, there are better options.
I feel people were like that a lot towards the back end of last season, but I think that's wilting a little bit because City are now looking at the fans are now looking at the options that they have.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think Nunes and Lewis are probably enough cover. Stones in there as well, yeah. So, and like you say, if De Bruyne is coming back, it's a new signing. So I think they might be all right. And I think my opinion might have changed on that since maybe a month ago, which probably tells you it'll change again. But I feel like the positions that you've worked themselves into and the progression that you expect from them over the season, I think they could probably even lose Phillips in January and still be okay.
But we've spoken every now and again about Pep not fancying him, Pep not trusting him, all this sort of stuff. Fundamentally, why hasn't it worked with Calvin Phillips at Manchester? Is it ability-wise? Is it he's just not been able to fit into the system, the puzzle? What is it?
I think it's a system thing. Guardiola spoke recently and he said, for games that are like chaotic, Calvin is perfect for those. And which is fine, but in Guardiola, you've got a manager who does everything possible during the week to avoid games becoming chaotic. You know, City keep possession as much as they can. While they have possession, the game is not chaos. The few players that they have that are a bit of chaos, you've got Doku obviously out wide, and then you've got De Bruyne and Foden to a lesser extent, but De Bruyne is like your sort of agent of chaos in the City team. And there you have like, again, one of the best players to have ever played the game, who sees things that no one else sees and whose vision is like just incredible. So, but he's also playing further forward. So that holding midfield role that is so crucial, Phillips just kind of isn't quite there. He would, I think Phillips can be really good in loads of other Premier League teams, and obviously he showed it for Leeds for, I say 2 years, but he was injured for a lot of the second year. So it might be a bit of, you know, he's still not quite got himself to that level and where he was in his first season maybe at Leeds, and he has had trouble, as Grealish and others had, of kind of like accepting, I deserve to be here, I'm in this squad because they think I'm good enough, and kind of getting that form up, and he's never really had the run of games to...
So how can you then? How can you... Training must be imperative then for Pep Guardiola, because if he's not building up any game time, how can you look at Calvin Phillips and say, well, you're not doing X, Y, and Z, because there's no game state to prove it in?
No, but it's difficult, but, you know... He said in summer, didn't he? He wanted to stay, and he went on the pre-season tour. He's had a full pre-season, but when he played in pre-season, he instantly didn't look as good as, say, Kovacic, who just arrived. And you kind of look at that and you think, if you're not getting it now after a year and someone else is coming in, and not like 100 million signing, like a 25 million signing is coming in, like half of what they paid for you, and is kind of looking like more of a better fit and better understanding than you are, then it's not looking good for you.
It's like you need to be a defensive midfielder, but like we've seen with a lot of City, well, every single other of Man City's midfielders, especially when you're looking centrally, you have to have more to your game. You can't just be a ball winner and a destroyer in this Man City side. You need so much more.
Yeah, and, you know, we shouldn't forget that it took Rodri 18 months maybe. Like, Rodri's first season was pretty hard to watch. It was just him basically running back to his own goal, trying to get the ball that had gone past him. But he had kind of no support, and, you know, that team that season really struggled. It wasn't just Rodri, but because of the circumstances, Rodri had the time to learn on the job. Now, because of Rodri, Phillips doesn't really have the time to learn on the job, but I can't remember a time that Phillips has played that he's been an 8 out of 10, or he's really stood out and you've said, right, he's given Rodri something to think about there. He's never really done it.
When they bought him, did you think that they'd, I don't know, maybe go to a double pivot, or did you think it was just going to be always competition for Rodri?
No, I think I think with the good players, you see that they can be both. And I think when they signed Phillips, it was like, this looks like a great signing. I don't remember many people thinking this isn't going to work out, because, you know, he was one of England's best players, a Premier League regular. This is like a sort of one of the textbook City signings, getting someone who's done it in the Premier League, international experience, a bit like Kovacic, who can just come in and knit straight into that City team.
A lot of the top clubs wanted him as well, didn't
they? Yeah. But he's just kind of got to... It didn't work. And I think he was ill in his first summer when... I remember he wasn't at his signing unveiling because he was ill. And it's just never quite seemed right.
No, I agree. So let's go on to Bournemouth at the weekend. The weekend, because it's tomorrow. Life is going quick, Si. 3 o'clock kickoff tomorrow. What are you expecting? I mean, it's got to be a City one written all over it. Iriola's struggling, isn't he? Got a win last weekend against Burnley, 2-1. First win in a long time. It doesn't seem to be working at this moment in time for him at Bournemouth. I think he's odds on to be the first manager sacked as well. A lot of plaudits from where he's came from, obviously in Spain, but it just doesn't seem to be transitioning at this moment in time. And you're looking at City, hopefully, and thinking they're going to carve through them, really.
Yeah, you don't want to get too carried ahead, but it has the hallmarks of a game that could get pretty ugly for Bournemouth. I've not seen too much of them, but when I have seen, because like you say, Raiola's had has a very good reputation. It kind of given me flashbacks to Pep's first season at City, where he was telling them to do things and they weren't quite doing them, and they were losing a lot of football matches as a result. The plan is clearly to play out from the back, but they're not doing it that well, and teams are able to press them high up the pitch, take the ball off them, put the ball in the net.
And he's a manager who wants to keep his principles in every single game as well. So against City,
yeah, and there is no team better in the league at pressing high up the pitch than City. So if Bournemouth come to the Etihad and try and play their way out from the back, or anything like that, City are going to be on them, and any mistake will be punished. And you're talking about a City team who are bouncing into form as well, and they'll have Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday in mind. With the Champions League with young boys, they will have that kind of qualification in their heads, aiming to do it. But they will be coming into Bournemouth full speed on the back of a week off, looking to sort of further build themselves up for Tuesday by really beating Bournemouth. So I kind of fear a bit for Bournemouth.
Yeah, 100%. Do you want to know something else on the sacking race as well?
Has Erik ten Hag moved into second place?
He's moved into first place.
Has he?
He is now the favourite to be sacked evens.
Wow.
Which I think is a perfect place to end the pod on. Si, thank you so much for joining me today. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. If you want to catch us on YouTube, please make sure you do so. Man City, Manchester Evening News. Make sure you're liking, commenting and subscribing as always. If you want to check us out on all of our audio platforms as well, you can do so. Please leave us a 5-star rating. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we will catch you on Monday. Cheers.